Well, hello to you all once again out there in vintage dirt bike land. Welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV. And if you're a brand new subscriber to my channel, then all I have to say is welcome aboard, and I hope you continue to enjoy future videos here on my YouTube channel. Now we're going to take a break from our current series of walking around the Terry Pickering classic motorcycle collection to feature a bike that, well, we've not really featured many of these machines on my channel in the past, but we're certainly going to take a look at one now. Now this bike here is of course not a Scrambles machine, but it's a very nice little trials bike that I came across at the recent 2024 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show. So let's dive straight into that video and take a look at Allan Whitton's lovely 185 R.A.P Bantam. Okay, so as I said, we're going to take a short break from our usual vintage Scrambles bikes to check out another kind of formula of the classic dirt bike world, being trials, of course, because believe it or not, we do have quite a substantial percentage of my subscribers who are into their trials machines. So in this featured video, we're going to have a look around the superb BSA R.A.P Bantam, and this is another one of the fantastic trials bikes that I came across at the 2024 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show. Anyhow, as I was making my way around the show, it was probably fair to say that I was totally consumed with the variety and the quality of the bikes that were on display around the halls at Telford. Although when I did spy this BSA trials bike, I certainly began to take a bit more interest in it, mainly because of the bike's very high quality engineering in its construction, and because this was my first real motorbike that I had as a younger man, which was a stripped down version of the old D1 BSA Bantam 175, which was the bike that I actually learned to ride, the one that had proper gears and a clutch, etc. So this Bantam engine at least brought back some great memories of my younger days, which is why I was so intrigued to learn a little bit more about its build and construction. But almost immediately when you take a look at this bike just sitting here on its stand, you can see that this is no ordinary British-built BSA Bantam with a Bantam road bike chassis and just a stock road going 125, 150 or 175 BSA engine. This creation here is still based around the famous BSA little two-stroke engine, although that's about where the similarity ends, because our little BSA here has some very nice bits of engineering and upgrades done to it, which I'm sure the old BSA engineers of the past would have been very envious of, because of its innovative parts and the very high quality of its construction. So let's just take a few minutes to try and decipher some of its intricate components. But when it comes to these trials bikes, I have to own up, I do know very little about them, because as you know, the bread and butter of my YouTube channel, to be fair, is usually based around vintage Scrambles bikes from the 1950s right up until the 1990s. But we've also been known to throw in the odd trials bike from time to time if they're interesting enough, and I have to say that this little Bantam beauty here certainly ticks that particular box. And so let's just first take a look at the R.A.P Bantam's chassis, which, as you've probably already guessed, isn't your stock run-of-the-mill BSA Bantam road bike frame that's had all of the lights and mudguards and all the other road-going paraphernalia taken off it, because this bike's frame here is a superbly engineered, purpose-built chassis that's been designed and constructed by DRR, which is Derby Road and Race Limited in Darley Abbey in the UK, who build all manner of motorcycle chassis for road and off-road motorcycles. And when you take a look at the quality of this chassis construction, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that this is a superb piece of workmanship in its own right, and it's very comforting to know that this country still has the engineering skills to build these top-notch motorcycle frames, and companies like Derby Road and Race are still keeping up that tradition of having the designs and the expertise to construct some of the best motorcycle frames in Europe. So we've just mentioned that the frame on this bike was built by DRR, but the entire machine was put together by the very capable hands of Allan Whitton. And after a brief phone call to Allan, he did confirm that this display chassis is another R.A.P Bantam Trials bike that's currently under construction, where it already has that little peanut Bantam engine slotted into the chassis as a display item to showcase Allan's superb engineering skills. And on this other side of what was originally the ignition magneto side of the Bantam engine, you can see that it's had a brand new set of casings which are completely different from the engine's original design. And one of the other upgrades on this Bantam engine was that this new clutch operating system, which again is a new design by Allan from what was the original DKW German design of the Bantam engine. So in these clips here, you can see the bare frame of the R.A.P Bantam with its very high quality welding and construction, and of course the little Bantam two-stroke motor sitting inside, prior to it getting all of the nice upgrades and the trick parts that go into making this fantastic motorcycle. But even in their stock standard trim, these little BSA two-stroke engines still made a good choice as a trials bike motor, because they did have quite a good spread of usable power, and probably they weren't one of the most powerful engines of its day, but it was quite simple and easy to maintain and rebuild. And also on display here on this table, you can see a short selection of the upgraded parts that go into building these new Bantam Trials machines. And you've got parts like snail cam adjusters for the rear wheel, and new footrest hangers, and new alloy gear shifters, and a host of other parts that all go together to build one of these R.A.P Bantams. But most of these parts were made, or at the very least designed, by Allan Whitton, an engineer of exceptional skill and ingenuity. But Allan Whitton and his AW Engineering Company, of course, are no longer in business, because Allan's now retired and it sold that particular concern. But he's still kept very busy doing special projects for the likes of friends and customers who want that very high quality and personal service. And actually, I do remember Allan telling me that he used to do high-end machine work for British motocross racing legend Dave Thorpe. So what better endorsement could you wish for your engineering skills and the quality of your work? Now, the R.A.P or R.A.P in the bike's title is in reference to the three people who had a hand in building this bike. That's Rob, Allan himself, and of course Paul Ridgard of DRR, who built the chassis for this bike. So Allan then named the bike after all three who had a hand in its design or construction at one point or another. But Allan Whitton also told me that this particular Trials Bantam was built by Allan for one of his dear friends called Mike Bonky Bowers, who was actually a BSA factory works rider back in 1968, and he worked in the BSA competition shop up until the early 1970s, which is of course when BSA sold off their competition part of the company. But not only was Mike Bowers a top trials rider, he was also a very good Scrambles racer as well. And as we've just previously mentioned, this left side ignition cover and casing that we see here isn't the original casing that would have been on the Bantam engine back in the day, as this part here is another one of Allan's engineering skills, whereby the casing's been re-engineered with brand new parts with that ancient contact breaker points ignition now removed, and a much more reliable and more efficient PVL electronic spark system put in its place. And if you're familiar with these old Bantam motors, then you'll also see that the engine's original clutch operating system's been totally removed, and this much better, simpler and more effective Allan Whitton design system has been substituted in its place. But this part again has been very well designed using very high grade lightweight aluminium, and here on our display chassis you can see that these new casings and this new clutch operating rig certainly give our mini Bantam a completely different look from the old DKW original design. And of course, as you'd expect on a bike such as this, many of the engine's internals have been upgraded, beginning with what Allan calls a bob weight crankshaft, which I can't even begin to understand, and the cylinder barrel here is said to be a 185cc that uses a piston that's been taken from a TS 185 Suzuki. And I expect that some of the barrels, other things like the transfer ports, will have also had some tuning or other work done to improve the engine's power and efficiency. So here on this right hand side of our Bantam engine, it looks pretty much as it was in the DKW days, although inside this casing you had a wet oil-cooled multi-plate clutch connected to the crank by a simple primary chain. And with regards the transmission, I think it's a 4-speed box that's inside this casing, quite similar to the one that was fitted in the later D144 Bantams of the past. But again, Allan told me that he worked his magic on the transmission, and he did some work on the gear ratios to make them more suitable for low-speed trials riding. And that little gear shifter there in the centre is an alloy replacement for what would have been a quite long steel shifter on the stock Bantam engine. And to fuel our little BSA Bantam piston port engine, it was an Amal concentric carburetor that had the job of mixing that fuel and air. And of course that Amal concentric is much the same carburetor that was fitted to many of the later Bantams way back in the day. But you can see that it's connected onto the engine and the airbox by a pair of simple rubber intake hoses. Now you can see that the airbox on this completed bike is a nicely constructed alloy part that has a washable foam type filter inside. But if you take a look at this unfinished display chassis, the airbox looks like it might even be made of something exotic like carbon fibre. But in actual fact, this airbox is made of plastic, and it was designed by Allan, but made by one of Allan's friends using a 3D printer So modern technology certainly does have its part to play when it comes to manufacturing unique bespoke components for these classic motorcycles. But moving on to the bike's alloy exhaust box, which was another part that Allan drafted together, which was then sent to a local fabrication shop to be manufactured in alloy. So it could then be paired up with this big bore stainless steel exhaust pipe that naturally goes up and over the top of the engine in the traditional trials bike fashion. And although it may look quite simple in its design, it's once again made from very high quality materials, which not only make it look good, it makes it extremely functional as well. But as I mentioned earlier on, this little Bantam engine, even in its stock 1950s or even 60s trim, would still have been quite a decent little motor. And although at that time not too powerful, it would have been docile enough to use as a nice plodding trials bike power plant. But with some of the goodies and those trick parts that Allan's now made and then fitted onto this engine, this once mundane little power plant is now right up to date and ready for taking its place in the modern trials bike world. So from the little R.A.P Bantam's engine, as we move on to the front end of our BSA, starting with these superbly made triple clamps, or triple trees, I think they're sometimes called in the USA, and I think some people even refer to these as yokes as well. But anyhow, these parts again are all made by the skillful hands of Allan Whitton, although I'm not sure if these are actually steel or alloy parts through that paint job. But again, no question, yet more quality components here at the front end of our R.A.P trials machine. So to keep at the front end of our R.A.P Bantam in check, Allan's used a set of Norton road holder sliders for the bike's front forks, and inside these stanchions he's used Italian Marzocchi internals to control the compression and the rebound, which I again assume that Allan's had these forks on his lathe or his CNC machine to upgrade them or to improve upon the manufacturer's original design, because by now you've probably guessed that Allan certainly doesn't do run-of-the-mill stock standard components. He normally takes what's usually classed as a normal factory part, and then he completely reconfigures it to be something a whole lot better and of course much more practical in its use. And these front and the rear hubs that are bolted onto our Telford trials bike, which I suppose at first glance they may look like they've maybe been borrowed from another well-known brand of motorcycle, but once more these hubs have again been made by Allan himself, so it appears that there's just about nothing that this guy can't make for a bike, and both the front and the rear hubs have been mated onto a pair of very high quality Morad alloy wheels using heavy duty stainless steel spokes to stitch all of those three parts together. And with regards to brakes on this bike, which as you can see are quite small, although they're still adequate for a light and nippy little trials bike such as this, because let's face it, as you know, trials riding is really all about skill and balance, so this bike won't be hurtling down the racetrack at 50 miles an hour, so these drum and shoe brakes are more than up to the task. But moving on to the back end of our trials show bike, where normally nowadays the sky's the limit when it comes to choosing rear suspensions for your trials machines, or even Scrambles bikes, because there's so much choice now in this modern world. And despite what you're thinking, no, Allan didn't make these shocks, because these are a pair of quite good quality alloy-bodied beta suspension units, which are used to good effect on some of the Bultaco trials bikes and others from back in the day. But again, these are good quality and certainly have a good range of adjustments if you want to make changes to the rebound and compression settings. Now, you've probably noticed that one of the more outstanding features on our Allan Whitton R.A.P Bantam is this nicely sculpted alloy fuel tank, which surprisingly wasn't made by Allan, but was actually manufactured by the same company who made the chassis for this bike, Derby Road and Race Limited. So not only are DRR pretty handy at building these Bantam chassis, they can also turn their hand to many other parts that are needed for these motorcycles. So maybe DRR could be another contact to add to your list if you need a bespoke frame, or maybe another one-off part made for your special bike. But I expect that this fuel cell here would hold enough premix gas to keep our Bantam 185 engine very happy when it comes to taking part in its next trial or off-road event. Now, also from this rear view of the bike, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Allan's removed the seat before putting the bike on display, although as you can see, there is in fact a minimal seat bolted onto the chassis, which of course most trials bikes do have, because these guys tend to spend 98% of the time standing up on the pegs and very little time sitting down. So you can see exactly why they have these minuscule excuses for a seat, because after all, this is a trials bike and not a scrambler, so maybe a seat on one of these bikes doesn't really come into the equation. So at the end of the day, as I said at the start of this video, these trials machines aren't exactly the usual bikes that we covered here on my channel, but it was the fact that this little Bantam engine brought back so many good memories of my first real bike as a younger man. And when I saw the engineering that this bike was built around, then that just intrigued me that bit further to find out more about the bike's builder and its construction. So you can imagine, with all of the high quality engineering and parts that go into putting one of these bikes together, I expect that they're not that cheap to buy, although I do remember Allan telling me that Derby Road and Race have already made 132 of these R.A.P Bantam frames, so there's certainly a few of them in circulation. And I expect that if you're one of the lucky owners of one of these beautiful R.A.P Bantam Trials bikes, then you're without doubt part of a very unique and exclusive club. And so coming up next here on my Classic Dirt Bike TV channel, we're going to make our way back to the Terry Pickering Vintage Off-Road collection. And this time round, we're going to have a look at this 1981 Italian 250 Cagiva twin shock enduro bike, which is another machine that's recently undergone a full restoration by Terry. So make sure that you subscribe, or at the very least return to take a look at this very unique Italian stallion. So thanks once again for taking the time to watch my video content, and until our next old school project is posted, it's goodbye for now.